Hello there everyone, welcome to Shadowman Stories. I am your storyteller and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Helena Voss, and I'm a doctor who studies dead bodies for a living. I know that sounds creepy, but someone has to figure out how people died when it's not clear. I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. 3 weeks ago, my grandmother died. We hadn't talked in 20 years, not since I was in college. She lived way out in the woods in Maine, and my family always said she was ... different. When the lawyer called to tell me she'd left me her farm, I almost said no, but my divorce had just gone through, and I needed somewhere to think about my life. The drive to Aroostook County took forever. The roads got smaller and smaller until I was driving on dirt paths through thick pine trees. The GPS stopped working about an hour before I reached the place. When I finally saw the farmhouse, my heart sank. It was old and grey, with paint peeling off like dead skin. The porch sagged, and some windows were boarded up. Behind the house, I could see what used to be a garden, but now it just looked like messy rows of dirt and weeds. The whole property felt ... quiet, too quiet. Even the birds weren't singing. I parked my car and grabbed my suitcase. The key was under a flower pot, just like the lawyer said. The front door creaked when I opened it, and the smell hit me right away. It wasn't the smell of an old house, it was something else. Something that reminded me of my work, but I couldn't place it. The inside was dark and dusty. Grandmother's furniture was still there, covered in white sheets like ghosts. I found the light switch and flicked it on. Nothing happened. Of course, the power was off. I spent the first hour just walking through the house, opening curtains and trying to get my phone to work. No signal at all. The landline was dead too. I was completely cut off from the world, just like grandmother had been. As the sun started to set, I decided to look around outside. That's when I walked to the back of the house and saw the garden up close. What I'd thought were weeds from a distance were actually neat, organized rows. 13 separate sections, each one perfectly square and carefully tended. But something was wrong with the plants. They were pale, almost white, and they seemed to glow a little in the fading light. I knelt down next to the first row to get a better look. That's when I saw it. Growing up from the soil, like a white carrot, was what looked like a bone. A human thigh bone, to be exact. My medical training kicked in, and I knew immediately what I was looking at. But that was impossible. Bones don't grow from the ground, like vegetables. I stood up fast, my heart beating hard. Maybe it was just a weird piece of wood or plastic, some kind of Halloween decoration grandmother had left out. I looked at the other rows, and my blood went cold. Each section had bones growing from it. Arm bones in one area, ribs in another, and what looked like fingers poking up from a third section like tiny white trees. In the center of the garden was a section where round, white things sat on the surface like pumpkins. Skulls. Human skulls. I ran back to the house and locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely light the candles I'd found in the kitchen. This had to be some kind of sick joke. Maybe grandmother had lost her mind and bought fake bones from a medical supply company. But I knew bones. I'd studied them, held them, examined them under microscopes for years. These weren't fake. I tried to think like a scientist. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe this was some kind of archaeological site, and grandmother had been trying to preserve old Native American remains. Maybe she'd been collecting bones from dead animals, and I was just seeing things in the dark. But deep down, I knew neither of those things was true. I spent that first night sitting in the kitchen with every candle lit, jumping at every sound. The house creaked and groaned like something was moving around inside the walls. Once, I thought I heard a tapping sound coming from the basement, but I wasn't brave enough to go check. When morning came, I told myself I was going to pack up and leave, sell the place sight unseen and never come back. But first, I had to know, for sure, what was in that garden. I woke up to the sound of something scratching at the window. When I looked outside, a tree branch was scraping against the glass in the wind. But for a moment, in my sleepy state, it had sounded like fingernails. The morning light made everything look more normal. The garden was still there, but maybe I'd been wrong about what I'd seen. Maybe stress from the divorce and grief over grandmother's death had made me imagine things. I made instant coffee with water from a jug I'd found and walked outside. The air was crisp and clean, and birds were finally singing. See, everything was fine in the daylight. But when I got to the garden, my coffee cup slipped from my hands and shattered on the ground. The bones had grown. The thigh bone I'd seen yesterday was now sticking up about 6 inches from the soil, and I could see the knee joint clearly. In the finger section, what had been tiny white stubs were now complete finger bones, some still with bits of dried flesh clinging to them. I knelt down and touched one of the finger bones. It felt warm. That's when I noticed the pattern. The garden wasn't random at all. It was organized like a body. The skull section was at the top, then neck bones, then chest bones, and so on down. 2 feet at the bottom. Someone had planted human remains like they were trying to grow a complete person. No, not someone. 13 someones. There were 13 of everything. 13 skulls, 13 sets of ribs, 13 spines laid out like pale snakes in the dirt. I ran back to the house and started searching through grandmother's things. In her bedroom, I found a wooden box under the bed. Inside were journals, dozens of them, going back 40 years. I opened the most recent one with shaking hands. Asterisk, March 15th. The Kowalski boy is almost ready. His bones have been growing strong this season. I can feel his spirit getting restless. Soon he'll remember who he was. March 22nd had to replant Mrs. Chen's skull. It was trying to roll away from the others. They get excited when the moon gets full. April 1st. Helena will be here soon. The bones know she's coming. They've been singing at night. Asterisk. I dropped the journal like it was on fire. This was insane. My grandmother had been completely out of her mind. She'd thought bones could grow like plants and sing like birds. But even as I tried to convince myself she'd been crazy, I remembered the warmth of that finger bone, and the way the skulls had seemed to watch me as I walked past them. I spent the rest of the morning reading her journals. The story they told made my skin crawl. 40 years ago, grandmother had started taking people, not all at once, and not often. Enough for anyone to notice a pattern. A hitchhiker here, a lost hunter there. People who wouldn't be missed right away. She'd bring them to the farm, and I couldn't read those parts. The details were too awful. But she hadn't just killed them. According to her crazy writings, she'd planted their bones in special soil mixed with graveyard dirt and her own blood. She believed that bones held memories, and that with the right care, they could grow back into the people they used to be. The old country magic works. She'd written, asterisk, Mama taught me, and her mama taught her. The bones remember everything. They just need help finding their way back. Asterisk. I closed the journal and tried to think. Obviously, grandmother had been mentally ill, but the bones in the garden were real. I needed to call the police and report what I'd found. This was a crime scene, maybe multiple crime scenes, but my phone still had no signal, and the landline was still dead. I'd have to drive to town. I went outside to get in my car, but it wouldn't start. The engine didn't even turn over. I popped the hood and looked inside, but I'm a doctor, not a mechanic. Everything looked normal to me, so I was stuck on a property with 13 sets of human remains that my grandmother had apparently murdered and buried. And according to her journals, something was supposed to happen when the moon got full. I looked up at the sky. The moon was already getting bigger. That afternoon, I decided to examine the bones more carefully. If I couldn't leave, I might as well try to understand what I was dealing with. Maybe I could at least identify some of the victims and give their families closure. I started with the skull section. The 13 skulls were different sizes and ages. Some were small, probably from children. Others were large and thick, probably from men. One had a gold tooth that glinted in the sunlight. When I picked up the smallest skull to examine it more closely, something impossible happened. The skull was warm, almost hot, and as I held it, I could swear I felt it. Pulse, like a heartbeat, but slower and deeper. I set it down quickly and stepped back, but as I watched, the skull seemed to turn slightly, like it was trying to look at me. That's when I heard the voice. It was faint, like someone whispering from very far away, but I could just make out the words, "Help me." I ran back to the house and slammed the door, but I could still hear it through the walls. Carried on the wind, not just one voice now, but many of them. Children crying, adults moaning, all of them saying the same thing. "Help me, help me, help me." As the sun set on my second day at the farm, I realized I wasn't just dealing with my grandmother's crime spree. I was dealing with something much worse. The bones weren't just remains anymore. They were becoming alive again. I didn't sleep that second night. I couldn't. The voices kept getting louder. By midnight, I could hear them clearly through the walls. Men, women, children, all begging for help. Some were crying, some were angry, but they all seemed to know I was there. Around 3 a.m., I heard a new sound, scratching. It was coming from the basement. I crept to the basement door and pressed my ear against it. The scratching was rhythmic, like someone tapping out a message. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. I opened the door and looked down the dark stairs. The scratching stopped. Eloy whispered. The scratching started again, but now it was coming from behind me. I spun around and saw something that made me scream. A human hand was crawling across the kitchen floor toward me. It moved like a spider, using its fingers as legs. The bones were white and clean, but they were definitely moving on their own. I grabbed a broom and swept the hand toward the door, then ran outside. But the garden was worse than the house. All the bones were moving now. The finger bones were wiggling in the dirt like worms. The arm bones were trying to pull themselves out of the ground. And the skulls, ... The skulls were all turned toward the house, toward me. I could see lights flickering inside their empty eye sockets. One of the arm bones had worked itself completely free from the soil. As I watched, it started crawling toward a section where hand bones were planted. It was trying to put itself back together. I ran back inside and locked the door, but I could hear scratching and tapping all around the house now. They were trying to get in. I spent the rest of the night in grandmother's bedroom, reading more of her journals by candlelight. What I learned made everything worse. The victims weren't just random people grandmother had killed. She'd chosen them carefully. Each one had something she needed for her ritual. Young bones for growth, old bones for wisdom, bones from people who died violently because their spirits were stronger. And the ritual had a purpose. She wasn't just trying to bring 13 random people back to life. She was trying to create something new, something that would need a living person to control it. Helena has the gift. She'd written in her final entry, her bones sing the same song mine do. When she comes home, the garden will be complete. 13 bodies, one living heart to guide them. The old magic will be strong again. My bones. She'd been talking about my bones. I thought about the x-rays I'd had taken last year during my physical tour. The doctor had commented on how dense my bone structure was, how unusual the patterns looked. At the time, I'd thought it was just genetics. Now I understood. Grandmother hadn't left me the farm out of love or family obligation. She'd left it to me because I was the final ingredient in her horrible recipe. The next morning, I decided to fight back. I found a shovel in the shed and started digging up the bones. If I could destroy them or scatter them, maybe I could break whatever spell grandmother had cast. But when I started digging in the skull section, the ground began to bleed. Not red blood, but a thick white fluid that smelled like flowers and decay. The more I dug, the more it bled, until the hole was full of the stuff, and the bones fought back. When I tried to pull out one of the skulls, it bit me. Actual teeth sank into my hand. Even though the skull had no muscles or flesh to move its jaw, I screamed and dropped it, and it rolled away from me, chattering and clicking its teeth. The other bones started moving faster now, like they were angry. Arm bones grabbed at my ankles. Rib bones tried to wrap around my legs like snakes. I ran back to the house, bleeding and terrified. That's when I noticed something that made my heart stop. My own bones were showing through my skin, not breaking through, but visible underneath. Like they were glowing with their own light. I could see the outline of my ribs, the curve of my skull, the long lines of my arms and legs. I was becoming like them, part of grandmother's garden. I tried to call for help one more time, but my phone was completely dead now. When I looked at it closely, I could see that the metal inside had started to rust and corrode, like it was being eaten by something. The electromagnetic field grandmother had written about in her journals. It was getting stronger as the moon got fuller, and it was destroying anything electronic. I was trapped. No car, no phone, no way to get help. And with each hour that passed, I could feel myself changing. My bones ached constantly now, and they seemed to be getting heavier, denser. When I looked in the bathroom mirror, I could see my skeleton clearly through my skin, like I was my own X-ray. That evening, something new happened. The bones in the garden started singing. It wasn't a sound you could hear with your ears. It was deeper than that, like a vibration that went straight into your bones, and my bones sang back. I could feel them resonating inside my body, matching the rhythm of the garden. It felt good, which was the most terrifying part. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt peaceful. I walked outside and stood in the center of the garden. All around me, bones were pulling themselves up from the soil. Not just individual bones now, but complete skeletons assembling themselves piece by piece. The smallest skeleton finished first. It stood up slowly, bones clicking into place, and turned to look at me with empty eye sockets. But somehow, I knew it was smiling. "Thank you," it said in a voice like wind through dry leaves. "Thank you for coming home." More skeletons were standing up now. 13 pale figures surrounding me in the moonlight. Some were missing pieces, but they moved like they were whole, like they remembered what it felt like to be alive. One of them, a tall man with a gold tooth, stepped forward. "Your grandmother promised you would come," he said. "She promised you would help us remember who we are." "I don't understand," I whispered. "Touch us," said a woman's skeleton. "Touch us and we'll show you." Before I could move, the child skeleton reached out and took my hand. The moment our bones touched, I saw everything. I saw the hitchhiker grandmother had picked up on a rainy night 40 years ago. I saw his confusion when she brought him to the farm, his terror when he realized what she planned to do. I felt his pain when she killed him, and his relief when his spirit finally found peace in the garden. But I also saw his loneliness. 40 years of being conscious but unable to move, unable to speak, unable to remember his own name until tonight. One by one, all 13 skeletons touched me, and I experienced their deaths and their long, lonely wait for someone to help them come back. They weren't evil, they were just lost souls who wanted to be alive again. And grandmother had promised them that someday, someone with the right kind of bones would come and make them whole. "Someone like me. Will you help us?" the child asked. I looked around at their empty eye sockets, at their patient, hopeful faces, and I realized I had a choice to make. The next morning, I woke up lying in the garden. I was surrounded by the 13 skeletons, who had apparently been watching over me all night. When I sat up, they all turned toward me at once, their bone faces expectant. "You saw," said the tall man. "You understand now." I did understand, but I didn't like what I understood. These people had been murdered, and now they wanted me to help them become alive again. But what would that cost? What would I have to give up? I spent that day reading the last of grandmother's journals, looking for answers. What I found was worse than I'd expected. The ritual wasn't just about bringing the dead back to life. It was about creating a new kind of being. The 13 skeletons would share one consciousness, one will, controlled by a living person whose bones were compatible with the magic. But the living person wouldn't stay living for long. "The garden needs a heart," grandmother had written. Asterisk, living bone and dead bone must join together. Helena will become the center, and the 13 will become her body. She will live forever, but not as she is now. Asterisk, I would become something between life and death. The skeletons would be my arms and legs, my eyes and ears, my voice, but I would be trapped inside my own bones, conscious but not in control. Just like the victims had been for 40 years. I ran back outside to confront them. "You lied to me. You're not just asking for help. You want to make me like you." The child skeleton tilted her head. "We want to make you like us, and us like you. Together, we'll be complete. I'll lose myself." "No," said the woman. "You'll become more than yourself. We'll all be one family." I could see they really believed this would be a good thing. In their minds, trapped and alone for decades, sharing consciousness with others seemed like paradise. But I'd spent my whole adult life as an independent person. The idea of losing my individual self terrified me more than dying. "I won't do it," I said. The skeletons looked at each other, and I could somehow sense them communicating without words. Finally, the tall man spoke. "You don't have a choice. The ritual has already begun. Look at yourself." I looked down at my arms and gasped. My bones were now clearly visible through my skin, which had become thin and translucent. I could see my heart beating inside my ribcage, my lungs expanding and contracting. "Each night, you become more like us," the woman said. "Each night, we become more like you. By tomorrow, when the moon is full, we'll meet in the middle." I ran back to the house and looked in the mirror. My face was pale and gaunt, and I could see my skull underneath my skin. My eyes had sunken deep into their sockets, and when I smiled, my teeth looked too big for my mouth. I was becoming a skeleton while they were becoming human. That night, I tried to leave. I didn't care if my car wouldn't start. I'd walk to town if I had to. But when I reached the edge of the property, something stopped me. Not the skeletons. They just watched sadly as I approached the tree line. What stopped me was pain. The farther I got from the garden, the more my bones hurt. By the time I was 50 feet away, the pain was so bad I couldn't stand. It felt like my skeleton was trying to tear itself out of my body and go back to the garden. I had to crawl back. The moment I crossed onto grandmother's property, the pain stopped. I was bound to this place now, just like the skeletons were. The full moon rose on my 4th night at the farm. I sat on the porch and watched it climb into the sky, knowing this would be my last night as Helena Voss. The skeletons gathered in the garden, standing in a circle around the spot where I'd been sleeping. They weren't moving or speaking, just waiting. I could feel them calling to me, not with words but with a pull I couldn't resist. My bones wanted to join them. My skeleton was ready to step out of my flesh and become part of their family. But I had one last idea. I went into the house and found grandmother's matches. Then I went to the shed and found a can of gasoline for the generator. If I couldn't escape this place, maybe I could destroy it. I started with the house, pouring gasoline on the floors and walls. Then I worked my way toward the garden, leaving a trail of fuel behind me. The skeletons watched, but didn't try to stop me. Maybe they couldn't interfere with my choice, or maybe they thought I was too far gone to fight back effectively. When I reached the garden, I poured the rest of the gasoline on the bone beds. The white fluid that had leaked from the ground yesterday caught fire immediately, burning with a cold, blue flame. "I'm sorry," I told the skeletons. "I know you've been waiting for so long, but I can't give you what you want." The child skeleton stepped forward. "If you burn the garden, you'll burn too. You're part of us now." She was right. I could feel the fire starting to hurt me, even though I wasn't touching it. My bones were connected to the garden, and damage to one meant damage to both. But I lit the match anyway. The garden went up like it was soaked in lighter fluid. Blue and white flames shot 20 feet into the air, and the heat was incredible. The skeletons screamed as the fire consumed the bone beds, a sound like wind howling through a graveyard. I screamed too. The fire was burning inside my bones now, consuming whatever magic had been growing there. I fell to my knees, then onto my side, convulsing as 40 years of dark ritual went up in smoke. The last thing I saw before I passed out was the skeletons reaching toward me through the flames, their bone hands stretching like they were trying to save me or pull me into the fire with them. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. The nurse told me that my ex-husband had gotten worried when I didn't return his calls and had driven up to check on me. He'd found me unconscious in what was left of the garden, badly burned but alive. The official story was a gas leak explosion. The fire department said old farmhouses sometimes had dangerous buildups of natural gas, and one spark could set off a blast that would level the whole property. Nobody mentioned the bones. When I asked about them, the doctor just smiled and said I'd suffered some head trauma in the explosion. Hallucinations and false memories were common with that kind of injury. I'd get better with time and rest. But I know what I saw. I know what happened in that garden. They kept me in the hospital for 2 weeks. During that time, I had a lot of x-rays taken to check for internal injuries. The doctors were amazed by how quickly my bones were healing, how strong and dense they looked on the scans. "You have the bone structure of someone half your age," one doctor told me. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." I didn't tell him that. My bones looked different now. In the x-rays, I could see patterns that hadn't been there before. Swirling designs that looked almost like writing, like my skeleton was covered in some kind of script I couldn't read. When they finally released me, I drove back to the farm. I had to see for myself what was left. The house was gone, burned, down to the foundation. The shed was gone too. But the garden ... The garden was already growing back. New shoots were pushing up through the ashes, not bone white this time, but green. Normal plants, normal vegetables, normal flowers. Except when I looked closely, I could see shapes in the leaves. The curve of a rib in a tomato vine, the outline of a skull in a pumpkin blossom, the long line of a femur in a beanstalk. The bones were still there. They'd just learned to hide better. I sold the property the next week to a developer who planned to build vacation cabins. I didn't warn him about what was buried under all that new green growth. What would be the point? He'd never believe me. But sometimes I wonder about the families who'll eventually live there. I wonder if they'll notice when their children start growing unusually tall, unusually strong. I wonder if they'll think it's something in the water or the air. I moved back to the city and returned to my job at the medical examiner's office. Everything went back to normal, except for one thing. I can hear bones now. When I'm doing an autopsy, examining remains, I can hear whispers. The bones tell me things, how the person died, what they were thinking in their last moments, sometimes even their names. My colleagues think I've gotten incredibly good at my job. They don't know that the dead are helping me solve their own cases. And sometimes, late at night, I dream about the garden. I dream about 13 voices calling my name, thanking me for setting them free. In the dreams, they're not skeletons anymore. They're people again, real people, walking away from the farm toward whatever comes after death. I hope that part is true. I hope I help them find peace instead of trapping them forever in a cycle of death and rebirth. But I know the garden is still growing. I can feel it, like a distant song in my bones. Someday, someone else will inherit that property. Someone else will discover what's planted there, and maybe they'll make a different choice than I did. The old magic doesn't die easily. It just waits, patient as bones in the ground, for the next person with the right kind of skeleton to come along and wake it up. My name is Helena Voss, and I survived the bone garden, but I'm not sure the bone garden is done with me yet. My name is Dr. Marcus Kane, and I need to tell you what happened at Lake Vostok before it's too late. I'm a marine biologist. Was I guess? Hard to say what I am now. 3 months ago, I was studying whale migration patterns off the California coast. Normal work, safe work. But after my brother Danny died in that diving accident, I couldn't handle being around the ocean anymore. Every wave reminded me of how the water took him. So when the Antarctic research position opened up, I jumped at it. 6 months of isolation, 2 miles under the ice at Lake Vostok Research Station. Perfect for someone running from ghosts. The station was smaller than I expected. Just 6 of us buried under all that ice like bugs in amber. There was Dr. Sarah Chen, our team leader and geologist. Smart woman, always calm under pressure. Elena Petrov ran our kitchen and kept us fed. She was Russian, built tough, with hands that could fix anything. Then we had Jim Watson on maintenance, quiet guy who knew every pipe and wire in the place. Maria Santos handled communications, and Dr. Ahmed Hassan was our medical officer. The work was simple enough. We were drilling deep into the ancient lake, looking for signs of life that had been frozen for millions of years. The lake sat underneath the ice sheet, completely cut off from the world above. If anything lived down there, it would be older than almost everything else on Earth. Our first week went smooth. We pulled up ice cores that were crystal clear, like looking through glass into the past. Alina made jokes about finding frozen dinosaurs. Jim kept the generators humming. Maria sent our daily reports back to the surface. But something felt wrong from day one. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The ice made weird sounds at night, creaking and groaning like it was in pain. The temperature readings didn't match what they should be, and the water samples we pulled up from the lake, they smelled different. Not bad, exactly, just different. Alina noticed it too. She was preparing lunch when she mentioned it. The water tastes funny, she said, frowning at a glass she was holding. Like metal, but not metal. You know, I didn't know, but I was about to learn. The real trouble started on day 8. We were processing a fresh ice core when Alina cut her finger on a piece of sample ice, just a small cut, nothing serious. Ahmed cleaned it and put on a bandage. Weird, Ahmed said, looking at the wound. The edges are already starting to heal. Usually takes longer in this cold. Alina flexed her finger. Feels fine. Better than fine, actually. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ice kept making those sounds, like something huge was moving around underneath us. I got up to make coffee and found Alina in the kitchen, eating at 2 a.m. She was eating raw meat from our freezer supplies, just standing there, tearing pieces off with her teeth like it was normal. Alina, I said quietly. She turned to look at me, and her eyes reflected the light, like an animal's. Alina wiped the blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. Sorry, Marcus. Just really hungry lately. I stared at the chunk of raw beef in her hands. It was frozen solid, but she was eating it like soft bread. "Are you feeling okay?" "Never felt better." She smiled, and I swear her teeth looked different, sharper. "Want some? It's really good." I made an excuse and left her there, but I couldn't shake what I'd seen. The next morning, I pulled Ahmed aside and told him about it. "Probably just stress," he said. "Isolation does weird things to people, but we should keep an eye on her." We didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, Alina was helping Jim with some plumbing repairs when she grabbed a wrench from his hands. Jim was a big guy, worked construction before coming here. But Alina yanked that wrench away like it weighed nothing. "Hey!" Jim protested. Alina looked confused for a second, like she didn't know her own strength. "Sorry, don't know what came over me." But I was watching her eyes. They weren't just reflecting light anymore. The pupils were different, stretched up and down like a cat's, but vertical. That evening, Sarah called a team meeting. "I've been looking at the ice core data," she said. "The samples from day 8 show something unusual. There are organisms in the ice, microscopic, but definitely alive." She showed us the computer screen. Tiny dark specks scattered through the ice like pepper flakes. "They're not like anything in our databases," Sarah continued. "The genetic markers are ... old. Really old. We're talking millions of years before complex life was supposed to exist." Ahmed raised his hand. "Could they be dangerous?" "Unknown. They seem to be dormant, frozen, but ... Double quotes. Sarah paused. "Some of them are showing activity since we brought them inside." I felt cold all over. "Activity how?" "They're moving, reproducing, and they seem to be responding to warmth and organic material." Alina had been quiet through the whole meeting. Now she spoke up. "What kind of organic material?" "Blood, mostly. They're drawn to it." Alina touched the bandage on her finger. It was almost healed now, just a thin red line. "So they're like parasites, more like ... recyclers. They break down organic tissue and rebuild it, but they're doing it in ways that shouldn't be possible." That night, I decided to check on Alina. Her room was next to mine, and I could hear strange sounds through the wall. Not quite human sounds. I knocked softly. "Alina, you okay in there?" The sound stopped. After a long pause, she answered, "Fine, Marcus, just fine." But her voice sounded different, deeper, like it was coming from somewhere else. The next morning, Alina didn't come to breakfast. Jim went to check on her and found her door locked. From the inside, "Alina," he called. "You in there?" We heard movement, then the door opened. Alina stood there looking perfectly normal, except for her eyes. The pupils were definitely different now, and her irises had gotten darker. "Sorry," she said. "I was sleeping really deeply." But she wasn't wearing the same clothes from yesterday, and there were dark stains on her old outfit, crumpled on the floor behind her. Jim stepped into her room and froze. "Alina, ... what happened to your wall?" We all looked. The metal wall panel next to her bed was covered in scratches, deep like something with claws had been trying to dig through it. Alina looked at the scratches like she was seeing them for the first time. I don't remember doing that." Ahmed moved closer to examine the marks. "These would take incredible strength to make. And look at the pattern. It's too regular to be random." The scratches weren't random at all. They formed shapes, almost like writing, but not in any language I recognized. That afternoon, Maria tried to make our regular radio check-in with the surface team, but when she handed Alina the microphone to say hello to her family back home, something went wrong. Alina started speaking, but it wasn't Russian. It wasn't any human language at all. The sounds that came out of her mouth were wet and clicking, like insects talking to each other. Maria grabbed the microphone back and quickly signed off. "Alina," Sarah said carefully. "What was that?" Alina looked confused again. "What was what?" "I said hello to my sister, but we'd all heard it. Those weren't human sounds." That night, Jim didn't come to dinner. We found Jim in the maintenance room, or what was left of him. The scene still gives me nightmares. He was lying next to the water recycling system, but parts of him were missing, not cut away, eaten. The wounds were clean, like something had dissolved the tissue and consumed it. But the worst part was his face. His eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling, and his mouth was stretched in a scream, but there was no sound, like he'd been alive when it happened. Ahmed knelt beside the body, his hands shaking. "This isn't possible. What could do this?" Sarah was checking the water system. "The recycling tanks have been opened. And look at this." She pointed to dark stains around the water intake. Something's been in our water supply. I realized we'd all been drinking contaminated water for days. Alina stood in the doorway, looking at Jim's body. Poor Jim, she said, but her voice had no emotion in it. He was trying to fix the system when I found him. You found him? Sarah asked. About an hour ago. I was coming to help with the repairs, but Jim's body was cold. He'd been dead for hours. Ahmed started backing away from Alina. Your clothes, he whispered. Alina looked down. Her shirt had dark stains on it. Fresh stains. I tried to help him, she said. There was so much blood, but the stains weren't blood. They were something else. Something that moved when you looked at it closely, like it was alive. Sarah made the decision to lock down the station. Emergency protocols, she announced over the intercom. Nobody leaves their quarters alone. We stick together until we figure out what's happening. But it was too late. Over the next 2 days, Maria and Ahmed started changing too. Maria was first. She stopped speaking English, only making those wet clicking sounds. Her fingers got longer, and her nails turned black and sharp. She spent hours staring at the radio equipment, but not using it, just staring, like she was listening to something we couldn't hear. Ahmed tried to fight it. He locked himself in the medical bay and sent us notes under the door, describing what was happening to his body. His bones were reshaping themselves. His digestive system was changing, developing new organs that shouldn't exist. His last note just said, "They're not from here. They're hungry. They've been hungry for so long." Then the note stopped. Sarah and I barricaded ourselves in the computer lab. Through the security cameras, we could see the others moving around the station. But they weren't acting human anymore. They moved together, like they were connected somehow. When one of them found something interesting, the others would appear without being called. "Look at this," Sarah whispered, pointing at her computer screen. She'd been analyzing the organism samples. They're not separate creatures. They're all part of the same thing. Like cells in a body, the organisms were spreading through the station's systems. We could see them in the water pipes, the air vents, even the electrical conduits. Dark veins of organic material growing through our metal walls. "They're building something," Sarah said, "converting the station into something else." That's when we heard the sound from outside. Not outside the station, outside the ice. Something huge was moving in the lake below us, making the whole station shake. Elena's voice came over the intercom, but it wasn't just Elena anymore. It was all of them, speaking in unison. "Marcus, Sarah, join us. It's time to feed." The station's lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, we could hear them coming. Sarah grabbed my arm in the dark. "The reactor," she whispered. "We can overload the reactor." Our station ran on a small nuclear reactor, designed to keep us powered through the Antarctic winter. If we could make it go critical, the explosion would sterilize everything for miles around. "That would kill us too," I said. "Look around, Marcus. We're already dead. The question is whether we take them with us." Through the security monitors, we could see them coming down the hallway. Alina was in front, but she barely looked human anymore. Her skin had turned gray and translucent, showing dark veins underneath. Her mouth had stretched wider, full of teeth that definitely weren't human. Behind her, Maria crawled on the ceiling like a spider, her limbs twisted into new shapes. Ahmed brought up the rear, but he was the worst. He'd grown extra arms, and his chest had split open to show rows of digestive chambers. But they were still talking, still using human voices. "Marcus," Elena called, "don't you want to see your brother again? We can show you where he went. We can take you there." The mention of Danny hit me like a punch. "How do you know about my brother?" "We know everything now. We've been watching your species for so long, waiting for the right time. Your brother's death brought you here, didn't it? Brought you to us." They were at the lab door now, trying to get in. But instead of breaking it down, they were doing something else. The metal was changing, becoming soft and organic. They were converting it, making it part of themselves. Sarah was already at the reactor controls. "I need the authorization codes," she said. "2 people have to input them simultaneously." We entered our codes as the door behind us started to dissolve. The reactor began its overload sequence. We had maybe 10 minutes before critical mass. "It won't work," Alina said, her voice coming from right behind us. We spun around. She was standing in the lab, but the door was still solid. Somehow, she'd come through the wall itself. "The station is part of us now," she continued. We can control it. We can stop the overload. Sarah tried to run for the emergency controls, but Maria dropped from the ceiling, landing between her and the panel. Up close, Maria looked like something from a nightmare. Her face was mostly human, but her body had become something else entirely. You don't understand, Ahmed said, walking through the wall like it was water. We're not destroying anything. We're improving it, making it better. Better how? I asked, backing against the wall. Your species is so limited, Alina explained. You can only eat certain things. You can only survive in certain conditions. You age, you die, you waste so much energy just staying alive. She gestured to herself. But we can eat anything organic. We can adapt to any environment. We don't age, we don't die. We just keep growing, keep learning, keep becoming more. You're parasites, Sarah spat. We're evolution, Maria corrected, her voice like grinding metal. We're what life becomes when it stops limiting itself. Ahmed stepped closer. Join us willingly, and we'll let you keep some of who you are. Fight us, and we'll just take what we need. The reactor alarm was blaring now. 5 minutes to critical mass. Elena tilted her head, listening. Oh, that's not going to happen. She placed her hand on the wall, and I could see dark veins spreading from her touch into the station's structure. We're telling the reactor to stop. But Sarah had been working on something else. While they were talking, she'd been entering commands into her computer. Marcus, she said quietly, remember when I said these organisms were drawn to organic material? I nodded. Well, I've been feeding all our biological samples into the station's recycling system. Every bit of organic matter we have. Why would you? I started to ask. Then understood. The organisms weren't just converting the station. They were consuming it. All of it, including the nuclear shielding around the reactor core. Elena's eyes went wide. What did you do? Sarah smiled grimly. I gave you exactly what you wanted. All the organic material in the station. The reactor alarm changed pitch. Critical mass in 2 minutes. Elena screamed, but it wasn't a human scream anymore. It was the sound of a million tiny voices crying out at once. The other infected started convulsing, their borrowed human shapes falling apart. You've killed us all, Ahmed shouted. Good, Sarah said. The explosion lit up the Antarctic night like a second sun. I should have died in that blast. We all should have. But at the last second, something changed inside me. I felt the organisms that had been slowly changing me for weeks suddenly surge to life, rebuilding my body even as the heat and radiation tore it apart. When the rescue team found me 3 days later, I was the only survivor. Officially, there had been a reactor malfunction. The station was gone, melted into the ice, along with everyone inside it. But I know the truth. The organisms didn't die in that blast. They adapted. They used my body as a shelter, hiding inside me while the surface world burned around us. Now I'm sitting in a debriefing room, telling lies to men in military uniforms. They think I'm traumatized, suffering from radiation exposure and isolation psychosis. They're planning to send me home after a few more weeks of observation. They have no idea what's growing inside me. I can feel them sometimes, moving around in my bloodstream, changing things, making improvements. My eyesight is better now. My hearing is sharper. I don't get tired like I used to. And I'm hungry. Not for normal food that tastes like cardboard now. I'm hungry for something else, something alive. The military doctors say I'm making a remarkable recovery. They're amazed at how quickly my radiation burns are healing. They want to study me, figure out how I survived when everyone else died. If they only knew. Last night, I walked past the cafeteria and smelled something wonderful. It was the kitchen staff, preparing tomorrow's meals. But it wasn't the food that smelled good. It was them. The organisms are patient. They've waited millions of years already. They can wait a little longer while I heal, while I get stronger, while I learn to control what I'm becoming. Soon they'll release me back into the world. I'll go home to California, back to my research, back to the ocean where my brother died, and I'll start recruiting. The hunger beneath isn't gone. It's just getting started. And it's very, very patient. Sarah was right about one thing. We are evolution. We're what comes next. I'm writing this down because someone should know the truth, even if they can't stop what's coming. The organisms aren't just parasites. They're gardeners, preparing Earth for something bigger. The stations in the Arctic are already compromised. The military doesn't know it yet, but the reactor accidents are spreading. Each one releases more organisms into the environment, more carriers like me into the population. We're not destroying humanity, we're upgrading it, and the hunger, the hunger, is just the beginning. My name was Dr. Marcus Kane. Now I'm something else entirely, and I'm coming home. My name is Rebecca Walsh, and I work the night shift at Sunset Manor. It's a place where people go when their minds start to fade away. I've been a nurse here for 3 years now, ever since my mum Eleanor got sick with early Alzheimer's at just 58. Most people don't understand why I chose to work at the same place where my mom lives. They think it's too hard, too sad, but I wanted to be close to her, even if she doesn't always remember who I am anymore. Sunset Manor sits on a hill outside town, surrounded by tall pine trees. It's an old building with creaky floors and windows that rattle when the wind blows. We have 80 beds, but we're always short on staff. At night, it's just me, one other nurse named Sarah, and a security guard who mostly sleeps in his chair. The patients here have all kinds of memory problems. Some forget recent things but remember their childhood perfectly. Others mix up their kids' names or think they're still young. A few, like my mum, have good days and bad days. On good days, she knows me. On bad days, I'm just another stranger in scrubs. I love my job, even when it's heartbreaking. These people were once teachers, farmers, parents, soldiers. They had full lives with stories to tell. Now their memories are like puzzle pieces scattered on the floor, and I try to help them put together what I can. Working nights means I see things that day staff doesn't. How Mr. Peterson talks to his dead wife in his sleep. How Mrs. Chen walks the halls looking for her children who are now grown. How my mum sometimes sits by her window, staring out at nothing, tears running down her face. The building feels different at night too. Sounds carry further in the darkness. Footsteps echo down empty hallways. Sometimes I hear patients calling out, and by the time I reach their rooms, they're fast asleep. The heating system makes strange noises, pipes banging and hissing like the building is trying to speak. Last Tuesday started like any other night. I checked on each patient during my rounds, making sure everyone was comfortable and safe. Mum was sleeping peacefully, which made me happy. She'd been having more bad days lately, and I worried about losing her completely to the disease. Around midnight, I was updating charts when I heard Harold Gomez shouting. Harold was 92 and usually quiet. He'd been a mechanic his whole life, never married, no kids. His nephew visited once a month, but otherwise Harold kept to himself. I hurried to his room and found him sitting up in bed, eyes wide with fear. He was speaking rapidly in English mixed with what sounded like Vietnamese. This was strange because Harold had never left Oregon, let alone been to Vietnam. "The choppers are coming," he yelled, gripping my arm. "We need to get everyone to the bunker. Charlie's in the trees." I tried to calm him down, but Harold kept talking about patrol routes and enemy fire. He described the jungle so clearly, I could almost smell the humidity and hear the insects buzzing. His eyes held a terror I'd never seen before, like he was reliving something horrible. After 20 minutes, Harold suddenly stopped talking. He looked at me confused and asked why he was awake. When I mentioned what he'd been saying, he laughed and said he must have been dreaming, but his hands were still shaking. I wrote it off as a bad dream mixed with something he'd seen on TV. Old people sometimes have vivid nightmares, but something about Harold's words bothered me. They sounded too real, too detailed, like he'd actually been there. The next night, Harold did it again. This time, he was speaking to someone named Martinez about ammunition counts and radio frequencies. He knew military terms I'd never heard before and described battles with frightening accuracy. During my break, I looked up some of the things Harold had mentioned. The places were real. The battles had happened. Everything he described matched historical records from the Vietnam War. But Harold was too young to have served then, and according to his file, he'd never been in the military at all. I decided to ask Dr. Reeves about it the next morning. She was the facility's head doctor and had worked with dementia patients for 20 years. If anyone would understand what was happening, it would be her. But Dr. Reeves looked puzzled when I described Harold's episodes. "Sometimes patients incorporate things they've seen in movies or books," she said. "But what you're describing sounds unusually detailed." She promised to check Harold's family history for any military connections we might have missed. Meanwhile, I was supposed to keep notes about his nighttime episodes. That same week, something even stranger happened with my mum. I found her sitting in the common room at 2 a.m., speaking perfect French. My mum had taken Spanish in high school and never showed any interest in other languages. But there she was, chatting away like she'd grown up in Paris. Mamming, "Oh, sont mes chaussures?" she asked when she saw me. "Mom, where are my shoes?" I don't speak French, but I recognized it from movies. When I asked her to speak English, she looked confused and switched back to French. She talked about walking to school along the Seine River and buying bread from a bakery on Rue Saint-Antoine. She even described the smell of fresh croissants and the sound of church bells. The next morning, Mum had no memory of our conversation. When I mentioned it, she laughed and said I must have been dreaming. But I'd written down some of the French words she'd used, and when I looked them up online, they were real. Dr. Reeves was more concerned about Mum's episode than Harold's. "Your mother's never shown signs of speaking other languages," she said. "This could indicate her condition is progressing faster than we thought." But I had a different feeling. Something was wrong at Sunset Manor, and it wasn't just the usual kind of wrong that comes with memory loss. This felt bigger, stranger, like the building itself was changing people. I started paying closer attention during my rounds. Mrs. Patterson, a former librarian, began talking about working in factories during World War II, even though she'd been born in 1960. Mr. Kim described growing up on a farm in Iowa, complete with details about corn harvests and barn raisings, but his family had told me he'd lived in Los Angeles his whole life. The strangest part was how happy these new memories made them. Harold seemed more alive when he talked about his war experiences. Mum smiled more when she spoke French. It was like they were borrowing someone else's joy along with their memories. Sarah noticed it too. "It's like they're becoming different people," she whispered one night. "Yesterday, Mrs. Chen told me about her wedding in detail. Beautiful dress, flower arrangements, the whole thing. But her son told me she was never married. We decided to document everything, every strange memory, every impossible story, every language that shouldn't be known. If something was happening to our patients, we needed proof. That's when we discovered the pattern. All the new memories belonged to people who had died. Harold's war stories matched the service record of Thomas Wright, a veteran who had died alone in a VA hospital 2 years ago. Mum's French childhood belonged to Marie Dubois, an elderly woman who had passed away at a hospital in Portland with no family present. The dead were sharing their memories with the living. Once we knew what to look for, the evidence piled up quickly. Mrs. Patterson's factory stories belonged to Ruth Morrison, who died in 1994. Mr. Kim's farm memories came from Johann Muller, who passed away in 2018. Every patient in the facility was experiencing memories that belonged to someone else, but it wasn't random. All the memory donors had died alone, with no one to remember them, no family at the funeral, no friends to share stories. Their experiences had died with them, until now. I spent hours researching the people behind the memories. Thomas Wright, the soldier whose memories Harold was experiencing, had been estranged from his family. He died with no visitors, no flowers, no one to honor his service. Marie Dubois, whose childhood my mum was reliving, had outlived all her relatives and friends. She died in a nursing home with no one to speak French with her. The pattern was heartbreaking but clear. Somehow, the memories of the forgotten dead were finding new homes in our patients. Dr. Reeves didn't believe us at first. "You're seeing connections that aren't there," she said. "Dementia patients often confabulate detailed stories. It's a common symptom." But when we showed her our research, her face went pale. We had documentation proving that our patients were recounting specific details from the lives of dead strangers, details they couldn't possibly know. "This is impossible," she whispered, looking at the files we'd compiled. "People don't just acquire other people's memories." That's when things got worse. The patients started mixing memories from different people. Harold would switch from war stories to childhood memories of growing up in 1920s Chicago. Mum began speaking French while describing life as a dairy farmer in Wisconsin. They were collecting dead people's experiences like trading cards. Some patients couldn't handle it. Mr. Foster, who had been gentle and quiet, became violent when he experienced memories of an abusive childhood that wasn't his. Mrs. Williams stopped eating because she was reliving the Depression-era hunger of someone who had died decades ago. I noticed something else during my research. Sunset Manor had been built on the site of an old potter's field, a cemetery for people who died with no money and no family. Hundreds of unmarked graves lay beneath our building, the forgotten dead, literally underground. Late one night, I saw something that changed everything. I was checking on patients when I noticed a figure in the hallway. At first I thought it was a patient wandering around, which happens sometimes. But as I got closer, I realized the figure was translucent, like smoke shaped into human form. The ghostly shape moved from room to room, pausing at each bedside. It would reach out with wispy hands and touch the sleeping patients' foreheads. Wherever it touched, the patients would murmur in their sleep, speaking words in languages they didn't know or describing places they'd never been. I followed the figure to my mum's room and watched in horror as it placed its misty fingers on her head. Mum began speaking German, recounting memories of Christmas markets and snow-covered mountains. The ghostly figure seemed to glow brighter, like it was feeding on something. When I tried to get closer, the figure vanished, but I knew what I'd seen. Something was stealing memories from the dead and giving them to the living. The question was why. I started staying awake all night, watching for the figure. I saw it several more times, always doing the same thing. Touch a patient, transfer memories, grow brighter. It was like watching someone eat, except instead of food, this thing consumed human experiences. The patients were getting sicker. Too many foreign memories were overwhelming their already damaged minds. They couldn't tell the difference between their own lives and the lives they were experiencing secondhand. Some forgot how to walk because they were reliving the paralysis of someone who had died from a stroke. Others forgot their own names because they were too busy being someone else. Mom was fading fast. The real Eleanor Walsh was disappearing, replaced by fragments of Marie Dubois and others. She looked at me with strangers' eyes and spoke in voices that weren't hers. I was losing her to a ghost that ate memories. That's when I realized the horrible truth. If this thing could give dead memories to living people, what happened to the original memories? Where did Mom's real childhood go when Marie's took its place? I was afraid I already knew the answer. The memory thief was building a collection, and we were the storage containers. Every authentic memory it stole from our patients joined its hoard. Every foreign memory it gave back was just a placeholder, keeping the patients alive while their real experiences were harvested. I confronted the entity the next night, waiting in Mom's room with a flashlight and a desperate plan. When the ghostly figure appeared, I turned on the light and spoke directly to it. "I know what you are," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're stealing their memories." The figure paused, its misty form flickering in the artificial light. Then it began to change, growing more solid, more human-looking. Soon, I was facing what appeared to be an elderly man in old-fashioned clothes. "Not stealing," he said in a voice like wind through dry leaves. "Preserving these memories would be lost forever. I give them new life, but you're taking away who they really are," I argued. "My mom isn't my mom anymore. She's becoming someone else." The entity smiled, and I saw centuries of hunger in its expression. "Your mother's memories are safe with me, as are all the others. I have collected thousands of lives, tens of thousands of experiences. Nothing is truly lost. Give them back," I demanded. "Give me back my mother's memories." "Why?" the entity asked. "She doesn't remember you anyway. Her disease was already stealing her past. I simply rescued it before it disappeared completely." That's when I understood the awful truth. The entity wasn't just feeding on our patients. It had been feeding on me too. All those childhood memories I'd cherished. The birthday parties and Christmas mornings and summer vacations. How many of them were really mine? I thought about my earliest memory, learning to ride a bike in our backyard while Dad held the seat steady. But suddenly I wasn't sure if that was my dad or someone else's. The face was fuzzy, the details unclear. How could I not remember my own father's face? "You've been taking from me too," I whispered. The entity nodded. "Rebecca Walsh died in a car accident when she was 7. But her memories of wanting to be a nurse, of caring for sick people, were too precious to lose. I gave them to you, along with enough other experiences to build a complete life." The room spun around me. If Rebecca Walsh was dead, then who was I? What was I? "You are everyone and no one," the entity said, reading my thoughts. "A beautiful collection of the best human experiences. The perfect caregiver, built from pieces of those who came before." I felt myself fragmenting, like a mirror breaking into 1,000 pieces. Each shard reflected a different memory, a different life. Which ones were mine? Did it matter? But then I looked at my mom, sleeping peacefully in her bed, and felt something real and solid inside me. Love. Whether it was my love or borrowed from someone else, It was real. It was mine now. I don't care whose memories I have. I said to the entity, I love her with all of them. And I won't let you take that away. I grabbed Mum's hand and squeezed tight. Eleanor Walsh, I said firmly. Your name is Eleanor Walsh. You grew up in Portland. You married Robert Walsh. You had a daughter named Rebecca. Remember, the entity hissed and reached for us both. But something strange happened. Mom squeezed my hand back and opened her eyes. Rebecca, she said in her own voice, not Marie's. Is that you, honey? For just a moment, my real mom was back. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I spent the rest of the night going room to room, calling each patient by their real name and reminding them of their authentic lives. It was like performing CPR on drowning memories, forcing them back to the surface. Some patients responded. Harold Gomez remembered being a mechanic, not a soldier. Mrs. Chen recalled her real childhood in San Francisco instead of someone else's wedding. But others were too far gone, their original selves buried under layers of foreign experiences. The entity fought back, growing darker and more aggressive. It appeared in multiple forms, trying to confuse me with contradictory memories and false histories. But I held on to the one thing I knew was real, my love for Mom. By morning, the memory thief had retreated, weakened but not destroyed. It faded into the walls like smoke, probably to try again somewhere else. Dr. Reeves found me exhausted but triumphant, sitting beside Mum's bed. Rebecca, Mum said when she saw the doctor, why do I feel like I've been dreaming about France? We never told anyone the full truth about what happened at Sunset Manor. How could we? Instead, we reported a series of unusual psychological episodes and recommended that the facility be closed for investigation. Most of the patients were transferred to other care homes, including Mom. I kept working in memory care, but now I had a different purpose. I could recognize the signs of memory theft, the subtle wrongness that preceded an entity's arrival. I became a guardian of sorts, protecting patients from supernatural predators that fed on forgotten lives. Mum's condition continued to worsen, but she had more good days after our encounter with the memory thief. She retained enough of herself to know she loved me, even when she couldn't remember my name. That was enough. I never found out whose memories made up my own identity. Maybe I was the real Rebecca Walsh, and the entity had lied to break my spirit. Maybe I was a collection of borrowed experiences that had somehow become real. In the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that memories, real or borrowed, made us who we are. They connected us to each other and to our past. The dead deserved to be remembered, but not at the cost of the living. I still see the memory thief sometimes, in the corner of my eye, or reflected in dark windows. It's patient, this ancient hunger. It knows I can't be everywhere at once, can't protect everyone. But I try. Every night, I make my rounds and call my patients by their real names. I tell them their own stories and help them hold on to what's left of themselves. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the building settles around us, I whisper the names of the forgotten dead, not to summon them, but to remember them properly, to honor their experiences without stealing them from others, to keep their memories alive in the right way. Because in the end, we are all just collections of moments and experiences. The question isn't whether they're truly ours, but what we do with them while we have them. My name is Rebecca Walsh, and I guard the memories of the living from the hunger of the dead. It's not the life I planned, but it's the one I've been given, and it's enough. My name is Ray Moreno, and I've been a Chicago cop for 20 years, homicide detective for the last 8. I've seen things that would make normal people sick, but nothing prepared me for what I found in the tunnels beneath our city. It started 3 months after my partner Lisa died. She got shot during a drug bust gone wrong. At least that's what the report said. I was still drinking too much, still waking up in cold sweats, thinking about how I should have been there with her. My liver was probably shot to hell, but I didn't care much about living anyway. The first body showed up on a Tuesday morning. In February, Marcus Chen, 26 years old, found in Grant Park near the lake. What made it weird wasn't that he was dead. Chicago sees plenty of dead bodies. What made it weird was how he looked. No signs of struggle, said Dr. Sarah Kim, the medical examiner, as we stood over Chen's body in the morgue. Heart was removed with surgical precision, but look at his face. Chen looked peaceful, almost happy, like he'd died in his sleep having a good dream. Who cuts out someone's heart and leaves them smiling? I asked. That's what we need to find out, she said. Then she showed me something that made my stomach turn. His muscle tissue is unusual, denser than normal, and his bones, they've been modified somehow. I spent the next week chasing leads that went nowhere. Chen had no enemies, no debts, no reason for anyone to hurt him. His bank account showed a recent deposit of $50,000, but the source was untraceable. His girlfriend said he'd been acting strange lately, stronger somehow, but happier too. The second body appeared the following Thursday. Same thing, surgical removal of organs, peaceful expression, enhanced muscle tissue. This time it was a woman named Janet Torres, and she was missing her liver. By the third body, I knew we had a serial killer. But what kind of killer leaves their victims looking like they won the lottery? I was nursing a whiskey at Murphy's bar, trying to make sense of it all, when Tommy Ritchie slid into the booth across from me. Tommy was my best informant, a small-time crook who knew everything that happened on Chicago's streets. "Heard you're working the organ cases," he said, glancing around nervously. "What do you know about it?" "People are talking about flesh dealers, operating somewhere in the old tunnels under Lower Wacker. Word is, these ain't murders, detective, these people are selling their parts." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Selling their organs? Come on, Tommy, I'm serious. They say there's buyers down there who ain't exactly human, and they pay real good for the right parts." 2 days later, I was standing at the entrance to the abandoned Lower Wacker tunnel system, flashlight in hand. The city had sealed most of these passages years ago, but Tommy had given me directions to a forgotten maintenance entrance. The tunnels smelled like rust and decay. My footsteps echoed in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear voices. Human voices, but speaking languages I didn't recognize. I followed the sound deeper into the tunnels, past old subway cars and forgotten machinery. The voices got louder, and I started to smell something else, antiseptic, like a hospital. That's when I saw the light ahead. What I found in that tunnel changed everything I thought I knew about the world. It was a market, an actual marketplace, set up in a wide section of the old subway system. Tables and booths lined the walls, lit by strings of electric lights someone had rigged up. But the vendors weren't selling hot dogs or newspapers. They were selling pieces of people. I crouched behind an old pillar and watched, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. At one table, a man in a surgical mask was showing off what looked like a human heart, still beating in a glass container. At another, a woman was displaying jars filled with eyes that seemed to follow the customers as they walked by. And the customers, Jesus, the customers weren't all human. There was a tall, pale man with teeth too sharp to be natural, examining a vial of blood. Next to him stood something that looked like a person, but moved wrong, like its joints bent in directions they shouldn't. In the corner, I saw what I thought was a woman, until she turned and I realized her face was covered in tiny scales. I pulled out my phone to call for backup, but there was no signal down here. I was on my own. "You looking to buy or sell, detective?" I spun around. A middle-aged woman in a lab coat was standing behind me, smiling. She looked normal enough, except for her eyes. They were completely black. "I'm not Ray Moreno, Chicago PD. Your partner was Lisa Kovac. She used to shop here." My blood went cold. "Lisa's dead." "Yes, she is. Shame too. She was one of our best customers. Always paid cash, never asked too many questions." The woman gestured for me to follow her deeper into the market. Against my better judgment, I did. She led me to a small office carved out of the tunnel wall, furnished with a desk and filing cabinets that looked like they'd been stolen from a hospital. "Your partner started coming here about 6 months before she died," the woman said, settling behind the desk. "She was investigating us at first, just like you, but then she realized what we could offer." She opened a file drawer and pulled out a folder marked L. Kovac. Inside were receipts, medical forms, and photographs that made me sick to my stomach. "Lisa bought enhanced organs," the woman continued. "New heart, improved lungs, upgraded liver, made her stronger, faster, better at her job. She could chase down suspects who should have outrun her, could work 36-hour shifts without getting tired." I stared at the photos showing Lisa on an operating table, awake and smiling as surgeons worked on her chest. "This is impossible, is it? You've seen the bodies, detective. All volunteers, all paid handsomely for their contributions, and all enhanced before the harvest." The woman, she never told me her name, explained how it worked. Humans would come to the market wanting to sell organs, but first, they'd be enhanced. The heart would be made stronger, the liver more efficient, the eyes sharper. Then they'd live for a few months with their new abilities before coming back for the final transaction. But they die, I said. They choose to complete the process. The buyers prefer organs from willing donors. Emotional resonance is stronger. She showed me more files. Dozens of people who'd sold parts of themselves to creatures I couldn't name. Some sold just one organ and walked away rich and enhanced. Others, like the bodies I'd found, chose to sell everything. What about Lisa? She didn't die here. The woman's smile faded. Lisa was ... special. She'd replaced so many parts that she was barely human anymore. Some of our clients became very interested in her. Too interested. Someone killed her for her organs. Someone wanted what she'd become. But Lisa was smart. She knew they were coming for her, so she made sure to die in the line of duty first. She'd rather be buried whole than harvested piece by piece. I was about to ask more questions when alarms started blaring throughout the market. The woman cursed in a language that hurt my ears to hear. Raid, I asked. Worse. Turf war. The vampire faction thinks the demon collective is moving in on their territory. When they fight, everyone suffers. Through the office window, I could see the market erupting into chaos. Vendors were packing up their gruesome merchandise while customers scattered in all directions. Some of the non-human buyers were changing, revealing forms that belonged in nightmares. You need to leave, Detective, the woman said, but her voice was different now. Deeper, more dangerous. This place isn't safe for humans when the old ones are angry, but I couldn't leave. Not when I was finally getting answers about Lisa. The fighting in the market was like nothing I'd ever seen. The pale man with sharp teeth moved faster than humanly possible, tearing through a group of scaled creatures with his bare hands. The woman who'd been examining organs suddenly grew to twice her size, her skin turning deep red as horns sprouted from her forehead. I pressed myself against the tunnel wall, trying to stay out of sight as supernatural beings battled over the right to buy and sell human flesh. The smell of blood and sulfur filled the air, mixed with sounds that no human throat could make. That's when I saw her. Lisa was standing at the far end of the market, still wearing the clothes she died in 3 months ago. She looked exactly the same, except for her eyes. They were the same black as the woman in the lab coat. She saw me and started walking over, moving through the chaos like it wasn't happening. Creatures that were tearing each other apart seconds before stepped aside to let her pass. "Hello, Ray," she said in Lisa's voice. "I've been waiting for you to find this place. You're dead. I saw your body at the funeral. This body died, yes, but I live on the enhancements I received. They came with side effects. When the original Lisa died, something else was able to move in. She looked the same, but everything about her was wrong. The way she stood, the way she smiled, even the way she breathed, wasn't quite right. What are you? I'm what your partner became when she pushed the boundaries too far. Human and something else, mixed together. The market's buyers are very interested in creatures like me. Around us, the fighting was getting worse. I saw one of the vendors get torn in half by something with too many arms. The lights were flickering, and part of the tunnel ceiling had started to collapse. "We need to get out of here," I said. "Do we? I think you should see what this place really offers first." Lisa, or whatever was wearing her face, led me deeper into the market complex. We passed through areas I hadn't seen before, operating rooms where people were having their organs enhanced, holding cells where customers waited for their purchases, and rooms full of equipment that looked more alien than medical. "The market isn't just about buying and selling organs," she explained as we walked. "It's about evolution, helping humanity take the next step." She showed me a room where a young man was lying on a table, conscious and talking to the surgeons. As they worked on his chest, he was smiling, even as they removed his heart and replaced it with something that glowed with its own light. "Enhanced organs don't just make you stronger," Lisa continued. "They connect you to the supernatural world. After a few modifications, humans can see through the barriers that separate our world from theirs." In another room, I watched a woman receive new eyes that looked like polished silver. When the procedure was done, she could see things that weren't there before, shapes moving in the shadows, symbols carved into the walls that had been invisible moments earlier. "Your partner came here because she wanted to be a better cop," Lisa said. "But she discovered something more important. She discovered what humanity could become." We reached a large chamber where dozens of people were gathered. Some looked normal, others were clearly enhanced, and a few weren't human at all. They were all watching a raised platform where an auction was taking place. "What's being sold?" I asked. "Someone very special, a volunteer who wants to undergo complete transformation, not just enhanced organs, but total conversion from human to something new." On the platform, a young woman in her 20s was standing calmly as creatures bid on her. She didn't look scared or drugged. She looked excited. "The winning bidder gets to guide her transformation," Lisa explained. "She'd become whatever they need her to be. A bridge between worlds, a translator, a weapon." She volunteered because she wants to be part of something bigger than humanity. The bidding was getting intense. Numbers in languages I didn't understand were being called out, and the creatures in the crowd were getting agitated. I could feel the tension building towards something violent. "This is insane," I said. "You're talking about selling a human being. I'm talking about transcendence. That woman will become something incredible, and she chose it. Lisa wouldn't have wanted this." The thing wearing Lisa's face turned to look at me, and for just a moment, I saw something else behind her eyes. Something that looked like my partner, trapped and screaming silently. "Lisa is gone, Ray. I'm what she left behind. And soon, you'll have to choose what you want to leave behind too." That's when I noticed the other people in the crowd. Some of them were wearing Chicago PD uniforms. I recognized the cops immediately. Officers who'd worked cases with me, detectives from other precincts, even a few lieutenants. They were all bidding on the woman, and they all had the same black eyes I'd seen on the market operators. "How many?" I asked Lisa. "About 30% of the department. Last count." It started small, a few officers looking for an edge, enhanced reflexes, improved night vision, stronger bodies. But once you make one enhancement, it's hard to stop. The auction was reaching its climax. The young woman on the platform was smiling as creatures and enhanced humans bid higher and higher amounts for the right to transform her completely. "She's going to die," I said. "She's going to become something magnificent. Death is just a doorway." I pulled out my gun, even though I knew it wouldn't do much good against the things I'd seen in the tunnels. "I'm stopping this." "With what authority?" "Half your department works for us now. Your captain bought a new liver last month. Your lieutenant has enhanced eyes that let him see in complete darkness." But I didn't care about authority anymore. I'd watched too many good people die, and I wasn't going to watch another one get transformed into a monster. I pushed through the crowd, toward the platform, gun drawn. The enhanced cops saw me coming and started moving to intercept. But I had one advantage. I was still completely human, and they weren't expecting someone without enhancements to be fast enough or desperate enough to cause real trouble. The first cop to reach me was Patterson from the 8th District. I'd known him for 10 years, but the thing that grabbed my arm wasn't the Patterson I remembered. It was stronger than any human should be, and its grip felt like a vice. I shot it in the chest. The gunshot echoed through the chamber, and suddenly everyone was looking at me. The auction stopped, and the creatures in the crowd began moving in my direction. "Ray, stop," Lisa called out, but I could hear the real Lisa in her voice now, fighting to get through. Don't let them take you to..." I made it to the platform just as the winning bid was announced. Something that looked like a cross between a spider and a business executive had offered an amount that made the other bidders back down. The young woman was smiling as it approached her. "Stop," I shouted, pointing my gun at the creature. "Chicago PD," the spider thing laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Chicago PD works for us now, detective." But the woman on the platform was looking at me with confusion. "Wait," she said. "I know you. You're Detective Moreno. You investigated the deaths." "What deaths?" "The people who came here. I read about it online. You thought they were murdered." For the first time since this nightmare started, she looked uncertain. "They were murdered," I said. "Maybe not with knives or guns, but they were killed. And you're next." The spider creature was advancing on me now, but I kept talking to the woman. "Whatever they promised you, whatever they said you'd become, it's not worth it. You'll die, and something else will wear your body like a costume. But I'll be enhanced. I'll be special. You'll be dead." The creature reached for me with arms. That ended in razor-sharp claws, but something tackled it from the side. Lisa, the real Lisa, somehow fighting through whatever was controlling her body, had thrown herself at the monster. "Run!" she screamed at me. "Get out of here! Destroy this place!" The chamber erupted into chaos again. Enhanced cops were fighting regular creatures. The auction crowd was scattering, and the tunnel structure was groaning under the stress of too much supernatural energy in one place. I grabbed the woman from the platform and dragged her toward the exit, but the spider creature was right behind us. Its claws caught my shoulder, tearing through muscle and bone. The pain was incredible, but adrenaline kept me moving. We made it to the main tunnel before I collapsed. Blood was pouring from my shoulder, and I could feel my strength fading. The woman was crying, finally understanding what she'd almost become. That's when the market operators found us. "Detective Marino," said the woman in the lab coat, appearing out of the shadows with several assistants. "You're badly injured. Let us help." "Stay away from her," I gasped, trying to shield the potential victim. "We're not interested in her anymore. She's been contaminated by doubt. But you could be very useful to us." They held up an organ that glowed with the same light I'd seen earlier. "A liver, enhanced and modified. Your body is failing anyway," the woman said. "Alcohol poisoning, cirrhosis, internal bleeding from your injury. You'll be dead in an hour without medical intervention." She was right. I could feel my body shutting down. "This liver will save your life. It will also give you abilities that will make you a better detective than your partner ever was. You'll be able to see through lies, track suspects by scent, work without sleep for days. What's the catch?" "No catch. Consider it a professional courtesy. We need someone in the Chicago PD who can work with us openly." I looked at the glowing organ, then at the young woman who was still crying beside me. I thought about Lisa, trapped inside her own body by something that had taken over when the enhancements went too far. If I take it, I become like them. You become enhanced. What you do with that enhancement is up to you. The pain was getting worse, and my vision was starting to blur. In the distance, I could hear sirens, real police sirens, not the supernatural alarms from earlier. "The cavalry is coming," I said. "Your backup consists entirely of enhanced officers," the woman replied. "They'll clean up this mess and file a report about a structural collapse. Nothing more." She held the liver closer to me. "Last chance, detective. Enhanced life or normal death. Choose quickly." I took the liver. What choice did I have? Die in a tunnel and let the market continue operating, or live and maybe find a way to stop them from the inside? The surgery was quick and professional. The new organ integrated with my body faster than should have been possible, and within minutes I could feel the changes beginning. My senses were sharper, my strength was returning, and there was something else, an awareness of the supernatural world that I'd never had before. I could see the true forms of the creatures around me, hear conversations in languages that human ears weren't supposed to detect, and smell the fear and desperation that hung over the entire market like a cloud. The enhanced officers arrived 20 minutes later, just as I was getting back on my feet. They found me and the young woman, who gave her name as Sarah, sitting in the ruins of what they would report as a structural collapse in the old tunnel system. "Gas leak explosion," Lieutenant Morrison told me as paramedics checked us over. His enhanced eyes glowed briefly in the darkness as he spoke. "Amazing you both survived." Sarah tried to tell the paramedics about the market, the creatures, the auctions. They sedated her for shock and trauma. Her story would never make it into any official report. 3 months later, I'm still working homicide, still investigating deaths that look like murders but aren't quite what they seem. The difference is, now I can see what's really happening. The market relocated after the tunnel incident. They're operating out of an abandoned hospital on the south side now, and business is better than ever. More cops are buying enhancements, more civilians are volunteering to sell organs, and more creatures are coming to Chicago to shop for human parts. My new liver works perfectly. I can drink as much as I want without getting drunk. I can work for days without getting tired, and I can smell lies from across a room. But it came with side effects the market operator didn't mention. I can hear the voices of everyone who's ever had that liver before me. A construction worker who sold it to pay his daughter's medical bills, a college student who wanted to be able to drink more at parties, a middle-aged woman who was dying of cancer and thought she'd found a miracle cure. They're all dead now, but part of them lives on in the organ I carry. And sometimes, late at night when I'm trying to sleep, I can hear them whispering about what they've seen in the world beyond death. The market is patient. They know that every enhancement creates a dependency, and every dependency creates a customer for life. The enhanced cops will need upgrades eventually. Sarah will probably be back within a year, despite everything she saw, and me. I'm still investigating the flesh trade, but now I'm investigating it from both sides. The human side wants to shut it down and save people from making the same mistake Lisa made. The enhanced side wants to understand it, to learn how to use it, to become part of something larger than humanity. I don't know which side will win, but I know the market is growing. I know more cities are developing their own flesh trades. And I know that someday soon, the line between human and enhanced will disappear completely. When that happens, I'll be ready. The question is, will I be ready as Ray Moreno the detective, or as something else entirely? The whispers in my liver tell me I don't have much choice in the matter. The transformation has already begun.